Thanks again for letting me present to you guys. This afternoon, we're going to talk a little bit about connecting Auros IQ to other systems, creating some system interoperability, and a new tool set that we've created this year called OmniBridge, and I'm going to show you how that works. Before we get started, though, quick question. Just quick show of hands. How many of you use Auros IQ on a day-to-day basis? Just have Auros IQ. Raise your hand. How many of you have Auros IQ connected to another system? Fair amount. How many of you would like to connect your version of Auros IQ to another system? Fantastic. Well, you're the group I want here because I have a lot to discuss about that. So as many of you know, Auros IQ is an enterprise solution. And it's a solution that not only allows you to manage your knowledge and in a way that you can capture, codify, and curate that information, but it also provides mechanism and functionality that will allow you to provision, process, and persist that information to other tool sets. Kind of explain that a bit further. What do I mean by that? We'll take CAD, for example. What happens in this example? Well, if we detect some context information from the CAD system, whether in the form of metadata, what we can do is we can provision back the relevant information in the forms of parameters or knowledge package information to the CAD system. From the CAD system, if we get inputs back from it saying, here's this value for this length or width or whatever, back to Auros IQ, we can then provision back a qualitative response, whether it's passing red, green, or yellow, what have you. And what we can do then is we can persist that data over time. So as that CAD model, in this case, if it ever changes, those new values that get passed into Auros IQ, the modeling processing engine will react, resend back those qualitative states into the CAD system, and that system goes on and on and on and on. And that's the way that our knowledge services are passing information from within Auros IQ to a secondary application. And if you've been to this conference before, you've probably seen me present the Auros IQ CAD connectors. And it does this exact thing that we just talked about. And so for some of you, you do have CAD connectors, and your system is doing this, and the knowledge services layer is playing that role. But there's other applications that get equal amount of benefit from creating connections into the knowledge services layer, like QMS systems, manufacturing execution systems, PLM systems, the simulation tool sets, right? We can provision that same information into those tool sets, process that information, and persist that data equally as well across all those systems. And it's when we get into this collection of systems, doing those interactions, you really start to develop a cognitive state. Now, some of you are thinking, well, when I raised my hand and I wanted to connect to a system, I really wasn't thinking about connecting to something that was model-based, something that I'm passing parameters to. And that's okay, because the knowledge services layer not only connects to those types of systems like CAD, PLM, and CAE systems, but it can also be used to connect to other systems that provide input into your workflows within Auros IQ, like ERP systems that understand projects and resources, your business process management tools that understand gates and timing. We do a lot of work with groups that want to interact with BI tools that create all kinds of special reports that we didn't even conceive of when the application was created. And I have some groups that have created internal power apps to collect information they want to pass into Auros IQ. And I even had one group that wanted to connect it to their HR management system to pass user information into Auros IQ. And that's great. And they all rely on these things that we call knowledge services. Kind of go a little bit deeper. One of the things I want to talk about is if your workflow doesn't require a connection to another application, then we call that a no-code solution. Actually, Holly talked about it, right? She talked about we get all these groups that want to put in new workflows into their system, and she goes ahead and she configures them, right? She goes in the tool and does it all within the tool set, Auros IQ tool set. We call that no-code solution because she has the ability to go in there and configure those workflows for herself. Now, for some of you that raise your hand and want to connect to some more popular engineering applications like CAD tool sets or PLM systems, we do offer commercial plugins for some of those tool sets like NX, Creo, CATIA, SolidWorks, AutoCAD, Teamcenter Vision mock-up systems. We have commercial plugins already built that allow you to deploy those into your infrastructure and then make connections between Auros IQ and those applications, and you get a lot of benefit from it. But these two solutions aren't where I want to go with this presentation today when I talk about system interoperability. Although they do connect and there is some interoperability with Auros IQ, the one that I want to talk about most is something we call low-code custom applications. And there's actually a really good example of a low-code custom application even today. And that was in Darwin's presentation. There's a video that he showed of an interface that his manufacturing engineers interact with about heat treat. And that was a low-code custom application. And for some of you that raise your hand and want to connect and you have a need for a low-code custom application, you might be wondering how you get started. Like, how do we go about that? And to create these low-code solutions, we need to talk about these things called APIs. I know a lot of you know what APIs are, but for some of you that don't, they're application programming interfaces. And these preform coded units are really what allow us to connect to, make connections between Auros IQ and these other systems. And for details on the knowledge services layer in the Auros IQ API structure, there's actually references right inside of your Auros IQ instance. If you go into your help API community, the very first knowledge packet that's in there talks about the knowledge services. And if you kind of drill down into the chapters, there's a link to get to the very detailed level of our APIs, our knowledge services layer here. And if you click on those links, you'll see a screen similar to this. This is called Swagger. It's where we store all the details related to all the API calls that we have. This is our API library information. And when you want to build a low-code custom application, these details are very important. And these are what allow those calls in and out of the system. But there's some steps that you need to take in order to build these low-code custom applications. The first one is you need to identify the purpose of that connection. Why do you want it? What's the benefit to your workflow? And I've worked with some team members that kind of skip this step, and it comes back into play later on, so you might as well do it up front. Identify if you even have a need to make a connection to another application, or can you live with the no-code solution? If you decide, you know what, we need a connection, then the next thing we want to do is kind of map out what are the critical elements between Auros IQ and the application you want to connect to, and map those items out. That way you know where the data is going from Auros IQ to the secondary application, or from the secondary application to Auros IQ. Not only will it provide more context and understanding for the effort that's needed, but it also provides a mechanism to understand which APIs are going to be needed to make that connection. Because in step 3, what really has to happen is we have to collaborate with your IT group. Auros cannot create these connectors into your internal systems on our own. We have to work with your IT group to understand your security protocols and how to authenticate into your systems. So because of that, we can't work in a vacuum. So we have to work with your IT group. When we work with your IT group, one of the things we're also going to understand is a connection to that secondary application even possible? Not all applications are created equal, and not all APIs are created equal. And what I mean by that is sometimes groups want to connect to some homegrown legacy apps that don't provide mechanisms to interact with other applications. So in that case, your connection to that tool set's not going to happen. The other thing I've ran into personally with a couple of groups is they wanted to connect into a system that is new enough and has the capabilities to connect, but the APIs that they wanted to connect to are behind a paywall. They had to become a partner into that application and pay a certain amount of money to get access to those functions to allow it to connect and send the data they wanted to connect to Auros, and for Auros to send into that part of the application. So this meeting with your IT group is really important to understand, if there's any kind of restrictions in place, and if a connection can be developed. And then lastly, once all that stuff's figured out, the creation of the connector is actually pretty simple. In most cases, it's pretty simple. And we just want to launch and test that connector. So at this point, you have an instance of Auros IQ over here, and you have your enterprise technology stack over here, and you've decided you want to create a connection between them, but just handing over a pile of API documentation to your IT group may not be enough to get them started. And that's where OmniBridge comes in. So OmniBridge is a preformed connection to Auros IQ, and we developed it to perform 3 main functions. The first function is to be an integration toolkit. So it's basically the first half of that bridge. It's a preformed connection to Auros IQ. So all of the interaction between Auros IQ and OmniBridge is the same interactions that your Auros IQ would have with whatever application you want to connect it to. So it provides that, it provides a toolkit and a starting point for a connector to be made for a secondary application of your choosing. The other thing it's an ability to, it's a second application that would allow you to model or to simulate your models into a secondary application. So throughout all of the discussions today, you've heard a lot about model-based knowledge. And if you want to simulate them into a secondary tool, like if your workflow is, I'm going to create these models that I want to put into this manufacturing execution system, if that's your goal, but you don't have that connection to that manufacturing execution system yet, but you want to see how these models would interact and perform in a secondary application, that's where OmniBridge can come in. It can be that stand-in to allow you to simulate your models in a secondary tool set. And third, it allows you to demonstrate it. You can demonstrate those connections to a secondary application. Again, it's that stand-in for whatever application you want to connect to. So this is a good segue, a demonstration. Instead of just talking about things in PowerPoint and showing you some little pictures about them, I'm going to hop out of here and we're going to demonstrate. All right, so let's kind of go through what this demonstration is going to be about. So let's say I have this community that I've created. Like we're going to go through here and I'm going to go to my product engineering community. In my product engineering community, I have some knowledge packets that I've created. If I look in here, this is an example of one of the knowledge packets that has to do with some product design standards that I've created. It has a model in here. It's talking about the material and minimum wall thickness. And maybe the application that I'm thinking of, I want to be able to share these models into a secondary application that's going to ensure quality that's happening. Maybe there's an optical system that can read the wall thickness of a product going down the line, and I want to be able to connect to that system. But I want to check it first. I want to kind of make sure my models are working in a secondary system, and I want to see how the interaction happens. So what I can do is I can take the information I have in my demo community here, my product engineering community, and what I'm going to do is, because I know I have these preformed groupings of information, right? I want to check it with sets. So let me just kind of show you what a set is. There's some discussion earlier about sets, right? And sets are a collection of knowledge packets, a dynamic, in this case, these are a dynamic form collection of knowledge packets. So here's my set, right? I have this collection. It's based on some metadata, and yep, this is what I want to put into my manufacturing execution system to test some things or whatever. And so show me how this works in OmniBridge. So what I'll do is let's close out of that. We're going to launch OmniBridge. Again, we're going to do this live, which could be really cool or really dumb. We're going to find out in a minute. And it opens. So we're off to a good start, better than earlier today. So this is a preformed secondary application that knows how to connect to Auros. So the first thing it's already done, it's already connected to the Auros server. There's kind of a setup you have to do to tell it where to go. We won't go through that as part of the demo. But the next thing it's asking me to do is select a source. And I've previously told you we're going to connect that source to a set. We want to look, how does it connect to a set of knowledge? And so in here, I'm going to come in, I'm going to put in my ID of information I want to connect to, and we're going to have it establish that connection to Auros IQ. So it establishes a connection, it looks at that set ID, and looks and finds, well, that set ID is tied to 7 knowledge packets. Some of them, those knowledge packets are design standards and functional requirements, manufacturing standard, an ergonomic standard, and a best practice. Right, so it looked into Auros IQ, looked at that set, and brought back a bunch of information about the contents of that set, which maybe that's important to me when I build my new application, right, to whatever other system I want to go to. But I said, yeah, that's great. So I hit apply. It's bringing in all this data for me. You can kind of see the little bar working. And the OmniBridge comes in and says, all right, there's, based on the information that I want to connect to, there's 8 parameters that were part of that information. Now again, I want to try to interact with my modeling knowledge in this example. So it gives me some warnings down here, tells me I need to create this information. So if I'm trying to simulate interacting with the parameter knowledge, let's slide that over a little bit, then you can see here, based on my set, these are a collection of the parameters that were contained in that set. Now none of these have values at the moment, but I can tell it to use the default values of the knowledge packet. And some of these need more values. Let me type in a value for that one. And I think this one needs a value too. That didn't have a default value. And I can pass these values back to Auros IQ as if I was receiving values from another application, right? And based on the input of those values for those parameters, it interacts with the knowledge processing engine, sends back a response as I can visualize inside of the OmniBridge, and I can see I have some greens and I have a red item. So inside of OmniBridge, if I want to, let's see if I want to interact with this red one, and click into it, I can see the details. I can see the details of the knowledge packet. Okay, this might be beneficial for me when I connect it to my other system. So I can see the details of my knowledge packet. Yep, that's fantastic. Something I might want to do. But from my other system, one of the things I might want to do too is I might want to create an assessment. So the OmniBridge, in here we have this button to create an assessment, and it's asking me which community of practice do I want to put it in. Well, that's good because in my secondary application I want to connect to, I need to know that as well. So if I come in here and I click in here, I'm going to put it in my production engineering community that we started from. And it's asking me, well, which project do I want to assign this to? We're going to put it to this, whatever, Buzz Cup. Which assessment type do I want to connect to? We're just going to do a demo. And what's a description? I'll just put demo. So now it's going to create the assessment control. And you can see it's doing some work. If you watch up here in the top part, this little section here changed. It's no longer connected to a set, but now it's connected to this assessment. So if I click on that assessment and open up to see the details, I can see all those details are definitely passed into Auros. They're stored on the assessment. I can see all the parameter values on the parameter sheet. I can click to the line item sheet. I can see all the reds and greens in my line item sheet. So OmniBridge did its job and passed information as I would expect it to do. But how does that get me any further to my connection to my other system? And that's where the toolkit, the integration toolkit comes in. So if we kind of minimize this and go back to OmniBridge, all those things that I have done in OmniBridge that I might want to do in my secondary system have been logged. So if I come down here to this API log, let me just blow this up so everybody can see it. All of the interactions to those APIs that have occurred while I was in this tool are now being tracked and stored. So if I want to look, where's the one for create assessment? And I want to get the details because I'm a developer that's helping to create this new connection to whatever system I have. And I know that I have to interact with this API called create assessment. Well, now I can look into this tool set and I can create this toolkit that shows me what do I need to put in the body of that call. What's included in the header information of that call? Oh, there's an authorization key that goes through. Is there any type of cookie that needs to go along with there? Yeah, you need to pass the user ID because that gets stored, and it makes it able for us to have access controls, understand who has the ability to do things. So we want to pass the username. And then what sort of response should I expect when I pass that information into Auros IQ? What sort of response should I get back? And so now from this service API call log, we have all the details that are needed for your IT group or for us, if you want us to help you create that connector, that are needed to build those connections into those systems that allow you to get so much more benefit out of Auros IQ. That is all I had for today. Any questions?
What versions of Auros does this play with? And two, just a statement, then you won't have to ask Jayshree and Sangeeta for so much help.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the stuff that I showed, they point to all the REST services. So REST is a type of an API call. I don't know how far back we started putting in REST. Was that 19, 18? Do you remember, Josh? Even before that, 17, 16? I don't know, it goes way back. We started using the REST services. So, I mean, those API libraries exist quite a ways back. We'd have to look to see, I don't know, I don't remember, maybe 15? Yeah, so yeah, everybody's beyond what it wouldn't support. So yeah, all of your installations have REST services libraries in place. So let me end on this. So if you are thinking about building a connector and you would like to get a version of OmniBridge, reach out to us, talk to your application engineer, talk to your solution consultant, call me directly, whatever. We can get you a version of it. You can play with it, get it installed on your installation, see how your models interact, look at your API call logs, and then we start building some really cool interactions to other systems. Good?
Thanks, Steve.
Right on.